What's going on, guys? Welcome to Tech Tuesday for One Piece. Today we're going to be talking about cards that you can tech in order to beat Black Smoker, which is the deck of the week, and then we're also going to talk about cards that Smoker can play in order to do better against particular matchups. So what we're going to talk about today first is the cards that are actually good against the deck. So we're going to be talking about red first. Red has a lot of options when it comes to it. The first card we're going to talk about is Gordon. Gordon is a 1-drop where when you bottom deck it, you can give a character minus 3000 power. And in combo with that, you have Vista, which can KO one of your opponent's characters with 3000 power or less. This does not work on cards like Borsalino or cards like the 5-drop Smoker, but they do work well against things like the Baby Kuzan or even cards like Kobe and things like that. Now, looking at it, red doesn't have a lot of removal options when it comes to black, particularly because black cards most of the time can't be removed. But for the threats that you can deal with, 4-drop Kuzan is a big threat, especially if you're playing Whitebeard. So you want to get it off the board as much as possible. The next card we have is Brook. Now, Brook for a 4-drop is a 5000 swing, but with 1 Dawn attached, you can give 2 of your opponent's characters minus 2000. And this is actually really beneficial because when you swing for 6000, you're already making them drop a card if they choose to block with a Borsalino and protect it. But now that you can give 2 Borsalinos minus 2000 power, it means that the Borsalinos are at 4000 and have to commit at least 2 cards in order to protect the Borsalino. And that's just on 1 Borsalino that they choose to block with. If you have other attacks, the minus 2000 power still sticks. So it's really good. The next card we have is Monkey D. Luffy. 5-drop. It has Rush, can get through blockers. Black tends to rely on their blocks when it comes to Borsalino, so being able to get through those blocks is fantastic. Another card is Roundtable. You're able to give one of your opponent's characters minus 10,000 power for the turn. That works great when they drop the 10-drop Kuzan, because for a 7 Dawn investment such as Roundtable into Vista, it means that you can KO their 10-drop Kuzan and set them back a lot, especially in the fact that their deck relies heavy on minusing costs of characters. And so when you're playing the 10-drop Kuzan, it means that if it's KO'd, you're set back as far as the 5 costs being KO'd. Also, if you're playing red, I would suggest playing Jet Pistol if there's a lot of black in your area. Jet Pistol doesn't work at removing Borsalino during your turn, but if the black character swings into you and you hit Jet Pistol off of life, you can KO a Borsalino. And the reason for that is because Borsalino states that his effect is only during your opponent's turn, not during your turn. So when it's the Smoker player's turn, if you hit Jet Pistol on your life, you can KO the Borsalino. Now next we're going to talk about green. Green has a lot of options as to dealing with black when it comes to being able to tap characters. We have Izo, which when you play it, you can rest one of your opponent's characters with a 4 cost or less. That means that you can rest a Borsalino and swing on it. And you'll notice through the trend of this that mainly a lot of these cards are to deal with black's characters that can't be KO'd, such as Borsalino or the 5-drop Smoker. There's really just a lot that goes into being able to deal with these because they stick on the board if you have no way to get rid of them. The next is Okiku. Okiku is good because it can tap things like the Smoker or the Borsalino, and it is a 6k swing as well. So if they have 2 Borsalinos, you can swing and tap one, and then swing and tap another one if you have 2 Okikus on board. And the next card is actually Yamato. This card, depending on how you play your turn, can be very destructive against black. When it comes down to it, double attack banish, it's really hard for black to deal with because they rely on having cards in their hand, because their effects don't work unless they discard cards from their hand. So if they are not able to take life and instead it has to get discarded, it's pretty much over at that point. The next thing is X Drake. Again, X Drake can't KO anything with certain effects, but it is good for turns where they swing with the 4-drop Kuzan for 5k power. You can just on play drop the X-Drake and not have to worry about the 4-drop Kuzan anymore. And the next card is actually Paradise Totsuka. This one actually allows you to rest a character with a 4 cost or less, so this does target things like Borsalino, and you can get through the annoying blockers that way. The main reason as to why Borsalino is kind of the main threat to every deck is because it is a 6k blocker on your opponent's turn, and that means that they have to commit at least 1 Dawn on their leader, and everything has to swing for at least 6, otherwise you can just tap it and that's it. Now for the next color, we're going to talk about blue. Blue doesn't have many removal options when it comes to KOing effects, but they do have a lot of effects when it comes to returning things to the hand. So the first card we're going to talk about is the Jinbei, 4-drop Jinbei. We're mainly playing it for its trigger, because if you rip it from life and play it, you can actually put a Kobe back into their hand, and while it is kind of annoying to put removal back into the hand of the black player, it means that on the following turn, if they want to play it, they're going to have to discard a card from their hand. So it's kind of give and take. You give them back a card, but in reality, they're going to be dropping 2 cards from their hand if they decide to play the Kobe again. And that's the same thing with Alvida. You can discard a card from your hand and return a character with a cost of 3 or less into their hand. So you can return things like a blocker, a Kobe, and it really is just mainly situational. But the next card is actually Monkey D. Luffy, and when you play it, you can trash 2 cards from your hand and return 1 character with a cost of 4 or less back to the owner's hand. Now, Borsalino is protected against KO effects, but not effects where it's returned back to the hand. So you can use the Luffy's ability and bounce the Borsalino back to their hand, and assuming that they don't have any other blockers on board, that is a 7k double attack that they're going to have to deal with the following turn. And if they decide to play the Borsalino again, you can just trash 2 cards again. Especially as a Venkov, it's really good. You can trash 2 cards and return the Borsalino back to their hand, which pretty much sets them back, because it's like they just played a character for no investment, because it just gets bounced back and they just wasted Dawn on their turn. And the last card is Doflamingo. It's the same premise as the Luffy. You can just play it and return a 7 cost or lower to its owner's hand. It is a 7 Dawn investment, but just being able to play it and pop a Borsalino back to hand without having to discard or anything like that kind of has a give and take effect. And the last color for playing against black is purple. Now, purple I kind of had a hard time finding cards for, but I think Minotaur is a very good starting point for purple. It means that if it gets KO'd, you're allowed to ramp a Dawn if you have an Impel Down leader, and black's premise is KOing a lot of cards, as we saw in Meta Monday. So when it comes down to it, Minotaur gets KO'd, and in turn you get to ramp a Dawn. But it also is a threat that they kind of want to deal with, because black doesn't have a lot of cards in their hand most of the time, especially due to a lot of discard effects from their side. So double attack most of the time will have a chance at going through in order for you to deal 2 damage, and most of the time they have to get rid of a lot of cards in hand to deal with it. And if they don't want to deal with it, they have to drop a blocker, and so it's just overall it's a good threat that also has good potential for if it's KO'd. Now the next card is the 4-drop Uta from the starter deck. It's blocker, same thing as Okiku, Dawn -1. On block, you can rest one of your opponent's characters with a 5 cost or less. This means that when you're blocking, you can potentially use it to tap things like the 5-drop Smoker that can KO, or I'm sorry, that can deal double strike if there is a 0 cost in play. So when it comes down to it, the Uta is really good, especially because it can tap things like Borsalino if you choose to. And the final card is X-Drake. Dawn -1, when you play, your opponent trashes a card from hand. Black already struggles enough when it comes to hand advantage, so playing cards that make them discard cards from their hand is just even better. If they have 3 cards in hand and it's one that they want to play, one that they want to discard, and one that they want to keep, now they have to choose whether they want to play a card, keep a card, or discard a card when it comes to effects. So now they won't be able to pop as many things because they'll have less cards in hand, and they'll just kind of lose the advantage. Now, cards that black can play, I meant to full screen this. There wasn't many cards that I thought black could play, but black's engine relies on one thing, and that's trying to make characters be less cost in order to pop them. And so I was really thinking about it, and when it comes to black, when you play against Zoro or play against anything with Whitebeard or big attackers, you really want to have Kuzan, baby Kuzan, into the 10-drop Kuzan, and it really makes things difficult if you don't have that. So I feel like Ice Age opens up a lot more windows. Now, let's say there's this scenario, your opponent plays a 9-drop Whitebeard, and you don't have 10-drop Kuzan in your hand or a 4-drop Kuzan on board. What you can do is you can use Ice Age -5 to the Whitebeard or the Edward Newgate, use the leader's effect to -6, and then you can play Kobe and KO the Newgate. Now, that is only a 5 Dawn investment with also discarding a card, or you can do one better and you can play the Ice Age into Sakazuki, which is a 7 Dawn investment and 1 card gone, but you don't have to rely on them having a 1-drop on board in order to get it to 0 for the leader's effect. But the leader's effect will occur, and it means that you can have a 7k swing. And it works out better for the numbers, but it really comes down to how many cards you want to really get rid of out of your hand. And Great Eruption, you can draw a card and then you give one of your opponent's characters -2 cost for the turn. Like I said, this just goes hand in hand with what the deck's main goal is. Allows you to replace itself and draw a card, and then it gives a -2 to a character. This is good for things like playing against Nico Robin. If you want to make it a 0 cost for any particular reason, or a 1 cost, you can actually use the Great Eruption to replenish itself and make the Nico Robin a 1-drop, which allows you to use things that can KO that are a 1 cost. And it also has a neat trigger where if you draw it, your opponent trashes a card from their hand. And we all know that hand size advantage is good in this game, and black already has a hard enough time keeping hand advantage, so cards that make your opponent discard are even better. But overall, I don't think that there's too much that black has to worry about when it comes to the meta. It's hard for a lot of decks to actually deal with the non-removal of things like Borsellino or the Smoker. And so your opponent really gets to pick and choose when they want to let it die from a block or a swing. But overall, those are just some texts that I wanted to go through. But thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Tech Tuesday. If you did, remember to smash that like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.